Welcome to Season 6 of the Prosthetics and Orthotics Podcast. We are absolutely thrilled to have you on board. We're talking to experts who know their stuff, the patients who've experienced these technologies firsthand, the vendors who provided the tools, and the thought leaders shaping the future. Together, we will uncover the ways to make the lives of those relying on these incredible technologies even better. We hope these discussions are going to be the highlight of your day.
Hi everyone, this is Joris Peels, and this is another episode of the Prosthetics and Orthotics Podcast with Brent Wright. How are you doing, Brent?
Hey, Joris, doing well, man. Getting ready for AOPA. I'm excited to see some old friends, make some new ones, and really excited about seeing some of the new tech that's coming down the pike too.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we should do an episode about that too. I think we're really excited to see upcoming IOPA stuff first off, and just new technology developments. I think always very, very close to our heart. So it'll be wonderful to do that at one point. Do we have like a sponsor or something for this episode, Brent?
Yes, absolutely. We have Matt Habecker from the Indiana Institute for Prosthetics in Indiana, as it shares. And one thing that's neat about Matt, he's like, Brent, I just really love what you guys are doing, and I want to sponsor you guys for a few episodes. And I thought that was really neat. And just a shout out to Matt. It's a small boutique prosthetic and orthotic shop, and they are going to take really, really good care of you, and they don't stop until you're happy. And Matt is an amazing thinker as well. He has multiple patents and patent pendings and ideas and all that stuff kind of in one spot, and you will get well taken care of if you go see him. Big thanks to Matt for just really liking and believing what we do and sponsoring a few episodes.
All right, that's wonderful. Thank you as well, Matt, from my behalf. And so, Brent, who do we have on the podcast today? Who's our guest?
Well, Joris, it's going to be a little bit different today. We have Hillary Sussman, and she is an author and a physical therapist, but she does a lot of writing about inclusivity, about people with disabilities. So she has a series that revolves around the adventures of Roxy, and I really look forward to hearing kind of her journey on it, how she got there, but then also potentially hearing some testimonials really of what her books have done for not only patients but facilities that include her books in their facility, in their training, what have you. So I'm really excited to hear her journey.
All right, so welcome to the show, Hillary. Tell us first, how did you get involved in orthotics and prosthetics?
Hi, well, thank you for having me, Brent and Joris. I've been looking forward to this, so thank you. As Brent said, I have been a physical therapist for 25 years now, and this new journey really started during COVID when I couldn't I was doing home care and also working in assisted living facilities. And of course, during COVID, I wasn't able to go see my patients. So my husband kind of suggested I start writing, and I just kind of out of nowhere just started writing. I could always rhyme. I had that ability. My dog Roxy had just had her fourth surgery. She had two, not in a row, but she had two ACL surgeries and two masses removed. And the doctor was like, she might lose her leg. So I just kind of thought of the idea of writing a children's book that taught a message. So I kind of combined in my background of being a physical therapist and working with different populations, disability populations, and also my ability to rhyme and my love for animals, especially dogs. And I came up with my first book, Roxy and Malibu, It's Okay to Be Different. And that came out June 2021.
Okay, that's so nice. So let's talk about the first book. And was that, do you mean that to have like an audience of people who are amputees or something like that, or like or have kids or like that, or was that like the real intended audience, or could it be for anyone, or what you intend it to have?
That was not the intended audience. I guess I just wrote the book and I wanted to teach a lesson that it was okay to be different. And then what I started to realize that, yes, of course, it's not only for children living with limb loss or limb difference. But I started to connect with children who had differences. It also was like, with autism or, all different differences, but specifically with the limb different population. So I started to get involved with clinics, and that's kind of the path I took. And then when the second book came out shortly after, November 2021, I had Roxy wear a prosthetic leg, a blade on the cover, because I had already started that new path working with this population. So it kind of fit. But the new book also talks about bullying and being an upstander. There are other lessons. So it's kind of a dual purpose book. It's for all children, with or without any differences, but it also is specifically can be niched down to the limb different community.
Okay. And I'm a little bit fascinated by this whole process. Like, how do you publish a book, or how does that work? Did you go via a publisher? Did you self-publish it? How did that work?
Yeah, so I self-published. It was actually like a little overwhelming because if you go starting fresh and you have to go look and find a self-publisher, the first one I picked actually was a fake company and I almost lost a lot of money. So it was kind of scary. So I finally found Palmetto Publishing in Charleston, totally legit. And they did both of my books and I had a wonderful experience. So I actually just finished my third book. And right now, all three books are being submitted to publishing companies. And we're hoping, fingers crossed, to get them published, like republish the first two and then publish the third as a series, because I prefer not to self-publish the third one. So yeah.
And how does that work? Can you? I don't know what you're like comfortable sharing, but how does that work? What do we think of like the time it takes to do that, and also like the money it takes to do that? How does that work?
So let's say I submitted my manuscript in August. This would be for my second book. My second book came out 6 months later. So it was like a 6-month process. And there was a manager, a project manager, and they did everything for me from line editing, they had 5 illustrators I picked from until I got the right Roxy. So I had an illustrator, and then they also did like the formatting, and then they do everything all the way until they upload it into what's called Ingram Spark, which is like the distributor, and they put it on Amazon and Walmart and barnesandnoble.com. And then once they upload it, I have nothing to do with them. I own all the rights. So it was not cheap. But there are ways to do it much cheaper. People can do KDP Amazon and it doesn't cost any money. I just was kind of overwhelmed with the process. So I went with, a company, you know what I mean? And I love the illustrator so much that I kind of just did my second book with him. That's what I did.
Okay, that's really good. And then, and now you're a millionaire and helicoptering into work, right?
Yes. Yeah, kind of.
But how does it work afterwards? Because okay, you publish a book, then you have to start like promoting it and stuff like that. That's also like a lot of work, right?
Yes, considering I didn't even have Instagram, I didn't know what a story was. I had to really learn. I'm still learning. Like the whole social media thing is super um, overwhelming to me. I had to have a website made. So, yes, my books came out June 2021, but like I don't even think I was up and running in that area and like sharing it with the world for probably a year. And then I had the 3-legged stuffed animal made. So I didn't even start with my packages that I share with prosthetic and orthotic clinics and hospitals. I didn't even have that package till really 2022. So it's all been a process, and things keep developing. And it's just been an awesome journey and a very unexpected journey. And I love it.
Okay, good. And do you have any advice if somebody's like inspired, like wants to start self-publish their own books? Is there any like key advice you could give them?
Yeah, I would absolutely not give up, because if you really want to write a book, I would start with going to KDP Amazon, because it's kind of like a place where you can go where it won't cost a lot of money and it should walk you through. I don't know. There's also all these sites like Fiverr, for instance, Fiverr, where you can hire people from all over the world at a very reasonable price to do illustrations, to do editing. So there's a lot of resources out there that I didn't even know about. If you really want to make it happen, you can do it. It just takes a lot of time and effort.
Okay, that's good. And then and so now like now you've got 3 books, right? The third one, did the storylines change? You say there was a blade. What changed between the first book and the third book?
So the first book, Roxy loses her leg. She goes to the vet, she loses her leg, and then when she goes home, she can't go to the dog park until she's healed. And then she goes to the dog park, sees a dog in the distance missing an ear. That's Malibu. And then
Well,
she
wait, don't
goes
tell
and
us everything.
shares.
Don't tell us everything, right?
Yeah, so in the first book, she shares her story of losing her limb with Malibu and teaches Malibu to be confident. And they both play with the other dogs, and they're accepted despite being different. So the first book is Roxy on like three legs, like a dog. You know, it's okay to be different. And the second book, interestingly enough, the illustrator, because they're in school, he had the animals like walking around like people. So they're upright. So that's why when he first sent me the cover, Roxy was standing there with no leg. And I'm like, okay, she's not going to hop around school. She could either wear a prosthetic leg or she can use crutches. So that's where I kind of got the idea to have her wear a prosthetic. So in the second book, she's in school and it's all about this bully. And, you know, the whole gist of the second book is that the power of words and that words matter. But I also teach about prosthetics because she's wearing a prosthetic leg. And the new book, which is not out yet, it's Roxy's still wearing a prosthesis and it's all about a birthday party. And I bring in a new character who's deaf and hard of hearing. So I bring in an invisible difference in the new book. And yes, we deal with Roxy and her anxiety. It's a birthday party with a pool, and she doesn't want to take her leg off in front of everyone. And she's afraid she won't remember how to swim. But then I bring in this new character and we talk about it's kind of a whole nother lesson as well, kind of a dual lesson book.
That definitely resonates with me. Bringing in this kind of invisible, quote unquote, disability, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, when I do elementary school programs. I don't know if you know that. So that started as well. So I've done about 28 so far on this journey. So I go into elementary schools, pre-K to 5, and I do a whole interactive reading of both books. I kind of do each grade at a time. So I'll do, if it's a bigger school, like kindergarten, 30 minutes, so I'll probably 6 sessions each grade. And we do an interactive reading of the books, and I show them what a I just got, this is so cool. I just got a blade from one of the girls I met in Orlando at the Amputee Coalition workshop. And I went to her, she was from Doylestown, Pennsylvania, which is right near me. I drove to her house last week and she donated to Roxy's cause. She donated her pediatric blade. So now I actually have a blade just like Roxy wears in her book. And I'm going to pass it around to the kids so they can feel and hold a prosthesis like Roxy's wearing. So I do talk about prosthetics, not the whole time, but I do introduce it because why not? It's education about limb difference awareness. And then we do these cards. It's okay to blank. And those are my favorite part. I have over 1,000 of them now. They're incredible what the kids write on these cards.
But like, what kind of stuff? What kind of stuff?
So they'll say it's okay to be short. It's okay to wear glasses. It's okay to not be popular. It's okay to come from a different culture. It's okay to be shy. It's okay to be sad, on and on and on. And then they write really, really powerful things on the cards. And I love sharing them. And they write funny things too. It's okay to love pizza. It's okay to be funny. It's okay to be scared. So I have thousands of them. And the handwriting is amazing because it's all like backwards and some things are spelled wrong, which I love, and I have everyone from ages 4 to 12 writing these cards. And that's my next idea for a book, is to have a book just with the cards.
So on these elementary school things, so you said you've done 28 of them now?
Yeah.
What has been, say, the response from teachers or the people that organize it, and then how do you? Is that kind of how you get referrals as well? Like somebody had done this at this school or another teacher, and that they're like, "Hey, can you come in and do it for us?"
It's a lot of work. I'm not gonna lie. So like I've started small, like in my school district and then the neighboring school districts, and I've worked outward. So, one school district, I met with the principal and he loved it. He emailed all the other four principals in the school district, and they're like, okay, we'll do what he did. Done. So I got 5 schools. Easy, but it's not always like that. Like my personal elementary school, I just called them this morning. Like I did another one in my town, in my school district, and I didn't get the other ones yet. I'll probably have them this fall, but I just have to call each school and find out the person who is in charge of assemblies, and it could be one of 5 different people. Um, but the feedback has been wonderful, and it seems to be a very important topic right now: diversity, equity, inclusion, and as I learned in Orlando, accessibility. So it's really DEI. It really should be DEIA, including accessibility. But it's a lot of work, but I've had great feedback. It's a topic that they really need brought in with the kids because there are so many differences, so many kids with IEPs and different backgrounds and differences, and they need to all respect each other.
And also, is like at the same time, is there a group that really benefits more or less from this? You think, hey, as a 4-year-old, is that too early, maybe, or is that earlier is better, or is 12 better, or what's the when doing something like this, what would be the optimal age, or isn't there one?
That's a good question. The youngest I go is preschool. So I recently did a preschool program, like 3s and 4s. They are so cute. So I usually do my first book. I kind of break it down. Not that the older kids can't read my first book, but my first book's kind of like a little less content, so I'll do like pre-K to 1 for my first book when I go to an elementary school program. And then I'll do 2nd through 5th grade for my second book. And then inevitably I'll have time to read my first book. But I probably wouldn't go lower than 3 and 4 years old. My wheelhouse is really like 2nd and 3rd grade, although I love kindergarten. They're all great. When I talk to the 5th graders, it's hard for me because they look like adults, right? A lot of the 5th graders are taller than me, and I'm like, I always question, are my books too young for them? But then we talk about bullying, and I showed them my website, and on my website, I have these pet posts, all these, like a pig in a prosthetic leg, a goat, and we talk about animals even have differences. So it's a different conversation, an older, more in-depth conversation, but nonetheless, it's important. So I think all grades benefit.
And is there, because on the one hand, we know that children are kind of kind, and also they often don't see this kind of stuff, right? So they often don't really, maybe aren't as programmed to see this. And then at the same time, sometimes they're super mean to other kids about if something just has the slightest difference to the group, and they could just be super, like, in effect, uncaring. But then, without realizing, we think that, So is there, what are kids' attitudes towards disability in your view?
It's very interesting you said that because when I was just in Orlando, I did a workshop at the Amputee Coalition National Convention with the youth. They have a YEP, Youth Education Program. So their youth camp this year I was with kids ages 13 to 18, which is not the age that I usually work with, right? I usually work K through 5. So it was really enlightening to me. And I was working with 18-year-olds, and one of this girl, Nadia, who was 18, I actually posted it. You'll be able to see it I posted it yesterday on LinkedIn. She said that she was limb different on both upper extremities. She said she did not notice until she was 10 years old that she was different from anyone. And also they didn't notice. And that's what I'm kind of hearing. Like up until like 9 or 10 years old, kids are kind of inclusive and they don't see differences. They kind of learn it as you go along, which is kind of sad. So she was like, I thought I was just like everybody else. I was just a little behind. And it wasn't until I was 10 years old that they realized I was different and I realized I was different. And that just stuck with me. I have that video of her on LinkedIn right now. But when they're little, they don't see it. And that's what's so beautiful about working with them so young. I'm trying to like pound in these messages over and over before they get to that age where social media comes in and they start learning all of these things and they start to bully.
Okay, that's a really good point to get there first, if you will. And do you think that the kids' attitudes change? Like, what makes a kid change their attitude? Because you could be really negative, like you're making Bob feel bad, right? Or you could be very positive. Are you much more about like the positive message? Does it be different, or is there kind of like a carrot and a stick there? Or what do you think actually works?
You mean when I'm talking about bullying with them?
Yeah, exactly. So if is it do you talk a lot about the negative consequences for other children, or is it much more like we should just be very positive, really positive message?
Well, in the second book, the bully comes into the lunchroom and makes fun of Roxy's leg and steals her bone. And then she goes on the playground and she makes fun of her leg again. And then the pig, her little new friend, Clementine, who she met in school, who was very nice to her, comes up and stands next to Roxy, even though she's tiny and the bully's so big, it's a bull. And that's what I'm teaching about bystander intervention or being an upstander, where you do not let this happen. If you're not physically comfortable going and helping someone who's being bullied, you tell an adult. And then all the animals kind of like band together to face the bully. Sorry. To face the bully. And basically, through the second book, I teach them that I'm like, raise your hand. This is what I say to them. I'm like, raise your hand if anyone's ever said anything mean to you. And they all raise their hand. Raise your hand if you've ever said anything mean to someone else. Be honest. And they do. I'm like, how does that feel? And then we talk about that. I said, your words are so powerful. If you even give someone like a dirty look or be like, ew, what is she wearing today? That person might go home and cry for a week. I said, but on the other hand, you have the power with your words to just by saying, oh my God, cool glasses, or I like your sneakers. You can make someone's day, make someone's week. I'm like, because you don't know what's going on in their lives inside. You don't know what's going on, right? And that's why we talk about the bully. The reason he's a bully is because he didn't like his horns. He was insecure. So I try to teach kids to like empathize. We talk about empathy and then realize how they have felt and identify with that.
Okay, that sounds like really positive. I love the idea that you're also like, making them emphasize with them as victims, but also as bullies themselves, and also realizing it's not that, because we get this bullying image that it's some like super evil kid who's got problems at home and like kind of like propagates that. And in many cases, it might be the case, but there's also a lot of people that just like kind of like, yeah, bully, without malice, or not even constantly, or just maybe like you say, just say the wrong thing once or twice for whatever reason.
That's a very good point, because it's funny. These elementary schools, by the way, are incredible. I mean, they're talking about kindness. They're, look, they're bringing me in. They all have these little, like one of the ones I went to, they have these acronym like SOAR. Our school is swords. Whatever accountability and all. They all have a word, right? So I feel like they're doing such a good job, and there aren't typically these bullies like in my book, right? But it's subtle. Like someone might just sit alone at lunch, or on social media now with all this Snapchat and all this stuff, you can see where all your friends are and you can see you're not invited. So maybe bullying is not like how we always thought of it stereotypically, like the big bully, like stealing their lunch money. But it does happen where people feel excluded, or they feel they just don't, they get dirty looks from people, or, you know what I mean? So I think or they're not invited places. So I think it takes all forms, and it still hurts.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point as well. I think that's a good point. And how long does it take you to write these books, by the way? And how do you like? The one thing is, okay, it's in your imagination. You mentioned a little bit of working with the illustrator, but I think it could a lot could get lost in translation. How do you actually optimize working with this illustrator?
Yeah, right now he's working. I found the illustrator. It was very cool. I never met him the first two books because I only was allowed to go through the project manager. So now with my third book coming out, hopefully, I wanted him to illustrate the third book. So I went on LinkedIn and I found him, and he does freelance. So I'm using him again, and he's actually working on my cover right now. So I figured along with my manuscript, we're going to be submitting the cover. I thought that would be a good idea to show the new characters. But, I have to express to him like what I'm looking for. The second book actually is very interesting. He illustrated my second book, and I changed one thing. I changed the color of the mom's shirt. Like, I'm not kidding. He just was right on it, and it was done. Whereas the first book, I had 100 changes. But I feel like he just gets what I'm trying to do, and that's why I want to keep working with him. And I've gotten a lot of compliments on the vibe of the illustration, so I just feel good about it. But it's really important.
You also said that you just got back from Orlando with the ACA. Like what these groups of people, so you've got the ACA, CAF, and all those. What's your relationship with them, and how is this kind of being incorporated into some of that? Because I mean, it seems like a really important thing to have at that level.
Yeah, so I don't even remember. I started working with prosthetic and orthotic clinics, bringing Roxy into the office. So they're not even necessarily pediatric clinics, but so right now I'm in about 50 clinics. So what does that mean? It means a clinic might have my books in their waiting room. Like simple, like a small clinic, like Shamrock Prosthetics. They have Roxy's books in the waiting room, and then my activities are free. My printables, there. If you go on my website, I have inclusive activities, everything from coloring pages to word searches to fill in the blank, and color Roxy's prosthesis. So they put them in the waiting room. So they've realized, like, why should we have them coloring Disney princesses when they could be designing Roxy's prosthesis? And then they use my three-legged dog, like when a new pediatric client comes in, she holds Roxy. So that they do that. Or I have like a bunch of hanger clinics. I'm probably in like 20. They'll buy my packages. I have these pink packages, and they might buy them and hand them out to new new pediatric clients. So I've kind of spread into the O&P world that way, utilizing Roxy as a resource. So like hospitals, like Children's Hospital Philadelphia, they have 50 of my dogs. So they'll hand in their limb clinic. So they'll hand out a stuffed dog to a new pediatric limb client. So and I have a bunch of pictures. It's been awesome. Like I just have so many pictures of little kids with limb loss or limb differences holding Roxy. And it makes me feel so good that Roxy's providing like companionship and support to them.
The other thing that I'm kind of curious on, and you touched on it with the older kids. I know you said that it wasn't your typical crowd,
Yeah.
but what would you say was the big takeaway with them? Approaching into this, it's a weird time. Like you're almost an adult, but you're not an adult. And then high schools are not known as the most empathetic places in the world either.
Yeah.
What are you hearing from that group that's was just a few weeks ago?
Yeah. So I had to kind of redo my program, which was definitely different for me because I didn't do what obviously I wasn't reading them the books. They're not younger kids. So I did an icebreaker where they went around the room and they passed around my stuffed Roxy and they just said where they were from and something interesting about them, which was great. Amazing stuff. Like the one girl with bilateral limb difference on both sides, she said she had been playing the cello for 14 years. Just awesome stuff. Hey, I can swim the 500, and no one can catch me. So I introduced Roxy to them, and I went through the books with them more just to like share what I've been doing to advocate for them and to give Roxy to them as a resource. And then the way I learned about them the most, I did these cards. So they were the anonymous cards. And the first question was, share an experience, good or bad, related to your limb loss or limb difference. And then what is something you wish other people understood about living with a limb loss, limb difference? So they filled that out in small groups and they shared with each other. And then they stood up and shared with the group. And it was awesome. And I think that a lot of the kids who are congenital, they've always been that way. So they were like really confident and everyone knew that about them already, right? Versus people who had a limb loss, but they all seemed pretty positive and pretty confident. And it was I was really impressed with them.
Okay, that was very interesting. And do you plan? How do you are you doing the author thing full time? Can you do this full time, or how are you combining this with just your regular work and life?
So I work in an assisted living 2.5 days a week, 2 to 3 days a week, and then right now I'm now scheduling my fall programs. So I'll just do like hopefully one or two programs a week, and then I'll do the physical therapy in between. And I'm working like right now. I just got a speaking engagement at a library in Delaware where I'm going to be going there and doing a program, which is a whole different. I didn't even think about libraries. I guess there's these free libraries that have grants and they bring authors in. So that's like a whole new area that I'm looking into. So I'm just kind of constantly finding different groups to work with. Obviously, if my new book comes out, I'd love to work with schools for deaf and hard of hearing. Maybe I think I'm going to look into like learning a little sign language to go along with my new book. I think that'd be really cool. So it's constantly developing.
Okay, that sounds like super duper cool. And you thought of doing something because this assisted living thing. I mean, this getting older thing. That's also something like kids need to grapple with and stuff. They often don't understand. Have you thought of doing something with that assisted living part of your life and these books, or not yet?
I don't know if I mean, I share my books with my patients because they all have, a lot of them are grandchildren and great grandchildren, but I don't work specifically with amputees. Right now my job is a little bit more like outpatient. It's in an assisted living, but some of them live in independent living, some of them are in memory care, and some are in assisted living. So I'm pretty much focusing with them on gait training and, strengthening and a lot of fall prevention and balance. So I don't really combine the book stuff with my PT practice, probably because it's geriatric, Um, but
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And just generally, I mean, I think the interesting thing is like this mission of teaching stuff. I mean, is that, do you think that this is like a franchise for you? You're going to keep going into newer areas and keep expanding it, or is this just like a hobby, or is this like the passion of your life? What's the status of this thing?
I mean, I love it. I loved what I did. What I did with the in Orlando, makes me want to now reach out. Now I can reach out to like Camp No Limits, and which I have talked to a bunch of these organizations, but now I feel confident that this type of program can be for all different ages because I was only like kind of pigeonholed into K-5, and my books, they are younger, but they can also share a message with older kids now that I've learned. Because I think the most important thing is have the kids share with each other and realize they're not alone. And that's what these workshops are for. I'm just going to keep writing. So my goal is to have a whole series of books with Roxy. This is the dream. Every book, Roxy is still an amputee and there's a lesson learned, but I bring in a different group that needs representation. So as I said, the next book, I'm bringing in the deaf and hard of hearing community. And then the next book, I'll bring in a different community. And I'll just end up hopefully with a whole series of books that teach lessons with the umbrella of just, it's okay to be different. And who knows?
That sounds absolutely wonderful. That sounds really, really great. And do you think your work as a manual therapist has that helped in kind of developing this sensibility? Because you do kind of like in a very, very hands-on kind of kind of way, like make people better.
Absolutely. I think having a physical therapy background kind of gives me insight. When I'm talking to an amputee, I know, I have worked with amputees in the hospital, at that level where I'm wrapping their limb, and so I do understand. I do not have a limb difference, but I do understand from a functional perspective and from a physical therapy background what is entailed and what they go through and what's important with skin breakdown and positioning. And so I do think working with all populations has helped me not write the book, but have a better understanding of the people I'm working with, if that makes sense, and even have more like hands-on experience and empathy for them in a different way. So I'm just an advocate right now. That's obviously, and I just feel very passionate about it. So I hope I have the honor of keep going, doing the next convention, and I'd love to get into hospitals. That's what I'm working on now, is getting Roxy into children's hospitals as a resource as well.
So East Point Prosthetics and Orthotics is a kind of a regional clinic. We have roughly 18 clinicians and such. What are some suggestions? So, I'd definitely be interested in hearing more about the Roxy stuff, but the also from a clinical perspective, I'm sure you probably hear the gamut of I love my prosthetist is okay, I'm looking for another prosthetist sort of thing. What would be some takeaway from many of our listeners are prosthetists, orthotists, and a lot of them have a lot of experience. And yes, this is our day to day, quote unquote, job, job. But and a lot of them have a lot of empathy. But sometimes we kind of get into this groove of this is what we do. What would you say would be some key takeaways from your interactions with the limb difference community of, hey, this is something that I wish my prosthetist or orthotist would do or do better? Any insight there?
That's an interesting question because when I went to Cosi Beloso, I went to her talk at the convention, and it seems like people have a prosthetist, and there's a physical therapist, and I think they really need to work hand in hand, because the prosthetist, I don't know, are you focusing on the exercises also? So I think everything's important. the communication between what the person's doing at home and then what happens when they leave the clinic. And I get it. You get all involved in your job. You see a patient, they move on. You see a patient. It can get monotonous, and everyone gets in that rut sometimes. And sometimes you have to take a step back and look at the whole person. Like, especially with a pediatric client, you're seeing them, they're fitting them for their prosthetic, and then they leave, and then they have to go into elementary school. And like, what is that like for them? And how does that feel? Like looking more at their life in the community and how. Does that make sense? Like that's where I bring like Roxy. I'm like, take Roxy, take the book, go into your elementary school and tell your peers about yourself. It's there's an emotional component, obviously, along with the physical component. I think that's really important for clinicians to remember, and to ask those questions. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it sounds like what you're just saying is, hey, take a step back, remember why you got into the field, right?
Yeah.
Take the few extra minutes and listen. I mean, it sounds like that's a big part of it too, and that's what really is going to make the difference between, okay patient care and great patient care.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the things, like even when we have to go to a doctor, or I have to take my son to a doctor appointment or whatever, and the specialist looks like he's got one foot out the door and one hand on the doorknob, even though that physician or what have you may be an amazing physician, in that moment, I don't feel like I'm getting amazing care, even though it could be the exact care that I'm supposed to get.
Yes, and I'm guilty of it too. If it's my yesterday I had 9 people, it's like by the 9th one, some of us, I'm not saying I gave a bad session, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have other things going on in your life. You're getting text messages from my son, and, you forget that each person, they're coming to you and they have that half hour or whatever that time period is. And it's so important just to like put everything else aside and focus on them, ask about their exercises. What are you doing at home? Make sure they have a home exercise program or refer them to a physical therapist or, so many video. That's why she has all those videos, Cozy. That's why I love her, for clinics. So yeah, we all need to be reminded of that, right? Especially like I'm 24 years in. So
yeah.
I think that's why the books are so exciting for me, because I was like, you know what? I think I want to do something else, but I don't really feel qualified to do anything else, So that's why this is kind of exciting for me, because a lot of my friends are like, okay, I've been a PT for 20 something years. What else could I even do at this point? Nothing pays the same,
Right.
It's hard to move.
Right. I think that's neat. And I think that's neat that you found it in a, challenging time like COVID. I think it changed the way practice happens in general, and I think, there's definitely a lot of negativity around what happened during COVID, but I think there's so many positive things. And
Yeah.
I mean, you finding this, even though I'm sure it hasn't been all sunshine and unicorns, has really stretched you and been very positive for not only you, but for the people that you encounter. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. It's funny. One of the programs I went to last fall, if you think about it, I had I guess it was a first grade class. They were like, they don't know the word. It's so weird. They don't know the word assembly. Is that what they had never had ever because of COVID. So they didn't know what it was to go in, when you're a kid, little, you have all these assemblies, right?
Right.
Oh, we're having an assembly. They had never had one. I was their first one ever. They didn't even know what the word meant. I was like, oh my God, because of COVID, nothing was in person for so long.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah. That is
weird.
That is weird.
So weird. Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much for being here today, Hillary. Thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you guys so much. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, just go to my website, www.adventuresofroxy.com. I'd love to talk with any listeners about how Roxy can be of use to you or your clinic or, your clients or anything like that.
All right. And thank you for being here as well, Brent.
Oh, this was great. This is neat. And yes, thank you, Hillary, for sharing your journey and really your passion around the writing. I think it's great for, all kids, but then kids specifically with a limb difference as well. So that's great.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, both of you. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. This was a fun episode because it is a little out of what our typical episode looks like. So that's cool. Brent, we have a sponsor for this next section, right? Is that one source?
Yeah, so one source is actually sponsoring the Hot Take by Joris Peels. And so,
goodness.
Joris, I would like to ask you a question.
Okay.
We have AOPA coming up.
Okay.
Actually, I'm flying out tomorrow
All
for
right.
AOPA. And the technology, 3D printing technology, has matured over the last year since we talked about AOPA, which is hard to believe that it was, over a little over 50 episodes that we almost did this kind of exact same question.
Mm-hmm.
But with the maturity of 3D printing, where do you start with asking the right questions about whether the technology may or may not be right with you?
Okay, just like on a stand. So first off, on a stand, I think it's really important to do a scan of the stands initially. So just like walk through everything and see everything without talking too much about everyone. And then you can already see the differences of the maturity of certain products and certain things. You'll see a lot of common things, and you'll start to see the difference between we made this one thing kind of as a gadget to watch out at the show and to a series production kind of place that they're a piece of technology that they're using day in, day out, and that's important. So do a scan first. Just walk through. I think AOPA is not that huge, right? I still haven't been, by the way. This is terrible. I feel horrible.
No, it's not. It's not big. I mean, they fit everything in pretty much in one big conference room.
Okay.
Yeah, so not big.
Okay, cool. Then you can just just walk through all the stands and catalog everything for yourself. Just take pictures of stuff and just catalog everything to yourself. And then you can be able to already put it in different buckets, right? This is FDM, this is MGF, this is I don't know what else, right? And then, so that's one thing. The second thing is don't talk to marketing people because they probably don't know anything, so avoid them and talk to the nerdy people in the back or sitting there not really engaging with people that they probably are actually maybe and that you get that from relatively small companies. Like the engineer is going to be at the show, right? So try to talk to the engineering people or operations people or maybe even C-level people. But marketing people usually, they don't, they give you some boilerplate answer, but they don't know how this stuff is developed. And ask them how they make certain components and how, certain things were designed and how things were made with certain constraints. Usually people who actually are doing their own printing, who actually have deep domain knowledge will want to share that, right? And everybody knows that DFAM, design for additive manufacturing, is difficult, for example. And talking about how you overcome certain challenges in design for additive manufacturing, or how you overcame certain challenges in designing for material extrusion, right? Or making it so it works on a desktop 3D printer but looks amazing. That's something that somebody who's really knee deep in the actual engineering is going to want to talk about, But the people who don't do stuff themselves, who outsource design, who outsource engineering, who don't know what they're talking about, they will always be like, oh, it's all secret. So usually the people that are actually sharing about the key things are really kind of, that really is very, very important. And then people that know, if you were seeing, for example, if you have an FDM connector of some sort, you know that the layer adhesion, people who listen to this podcast will know that with material extrusion, you're building layer upon layer, right? On top of each other. And on a relatively inexpensive printer with a relatively inexpensive material, which is great. You get a highly dimensionally accurate part, but it's kind of rough looking. But of course, logically, even if you don't know a lot about 3D printing, you know that there's a chance that in between those layers, if there's no layer adhesion, or interlayer bonding or in-layer adhesion, depending on who you are, if that's low, then that part will come apart at that seam, if you will, in between those layers, more likely than other parts, right? So you want to usually see that part being stressed in a different direction, or is designed in such a way that these layers are super adhered to each other, or is designed in such a way that these stresses are absorbed by some rib or some other kind of construction. And you'll want to actually be able to converse with someone about why they designed this thing, right? And if they don't know, then they probably don't really make it, themselves or in-house. And also, we kind of on the 3D printing thing, we're all conversant in a certain lingo, and we're conversant in certain kind of ways of designing, ways of making things. And typically, like, the people that know will want to share that because they know that the real difficulty is in making the stuff reliable and repeatable, and not per se on the design. And if they have something kind of breakthrough amazing design, well, then they probably have patented it, or they probably have some other trade secret type of stuff. So usually the people that are actually conversely the most kind of secretive are actually usually they have the least amount of domain knowledge on a particular subject or area. The other way you can compare things is how good do the prints look, right? At one point, if you're looking at desktop print, there's like an embarrassment level that you don't want to show. You don't want to show that print if you know what you're doing, and a lot of people who've been printing at home can get, like, from a Prusa type printer, a really nice result. And a lot of times you'll see people that have really rough types of prints and really rough types of parts. There's also kind of questions that are good at catching people out. We all know, for example, that moisture in 3D prints are a problem, or we know that there's a problem of also kind of making things watertight. We know that deformation is a problem for ABS. It's kind of talking about these things because, especially for large parts, in solving these problems are quite the struggle of the people that actually know what they're doing. And it's quite difficult. If you're talking about somebody who's using MJF, of course, that post-processing is really important. If you just order a part, you have no idea what they're doing on post-processing. You have no idea if it goes into a AMT machine or a dimension machine, or you have no idea. There's all this labor involved in that. But if you have a guy who's actually got his knees up into his fingernails and his ankles into powder, right? That guy's going to want to talk about post-processing because that is like a big part of his life every day. Her life is going to wake up and she's going to be walking around with a vacuum cleaner. She's going to be trying to keep that clean. She's going to be trying to post-process this stuff in a really accurate way time after time. So that's a way of really finding good people that I think want to share this. I mean, people typically that are really secretive, unless they've developed like a really core secret technology type of thing, they usually aren't the people that actually know what they're doing.
I think that's pretty interesting, and I'm glad you brought up post-processing because that's really been a big change over the last year. So that's what I would encourage people to take a look at on this show is take a go around and look. So if the parts look like they've just come out of a machine or, and there's no post-processing, it just means that process hasn't matured or they haven't kept up. I think that's, they might be showing, hey, this is what the raw is, but then you can dive in as what is your post-processing. And then the other thing that I always look at is what does the finish look like? So can you see the lines? And seeing some lines, especially in the powder bed fusion side of things, not a crazy deal, but they should be minimized once been post-processed. But then look at your trim lines. Are they rounded or are they squared? Do you see any pixelation around or lower resolution areas, triangulation, which means that a lower resolution software has been used that's not optimized for powder bed fusion. So those are the types of things that you can dive a little bit deeper on. And then just like what Joris is saying, that is when you start talking to the nerds, right? And not the sales guys when you go into these shows. So I think that's great. And Joris, I think we'd be remiss. We did introduce one source, but we didn't say what they do.
Exactly. So one sort, I still don't really understand. It's like software plus like a buying combination kind of thing. It's like, what is it exactly?
Yeah. So one of the things, and we just actually ran it with East Point Prosthetics and Orthotics. We had a microprocessor knee that, or microprocessor prosthesis that we had to do for a patient. And so what it did is it boxed all the documentation and all the stuff that you need to get this thing authorized and off to the races, along with helping buy or getting components for the prosthesis based on their buying power with the manufacturers. And so that combination, and I just talked with Chris this morning on how it went, and he said it's going really, really well, and he feels very good that they have exactly what they need to get this thing authorized and paid, and save a few bucks along the way. So that's one source in a nutshell, is that it helps you on the front end, get all the documentation, all the administration stuff in one spot. So you're decreasing your time involved in writing notes and all that stuff. And then they're also helping source those parts that you're going to use anyway. And a lot of times you will probably get a better price because they're able to leverage their current pricing structure with the big manufacturers. So I think it's a really neat opportunity for people to save money, save time, and then have some quicker cash flow because your documentation is better.
Okay. All right, guys. All right. Thank you so much for listening to the Prosthetic Human Thoughts podcast, and you have a wonderful day.